The usual Bortle 7 skies here in Oakland as I'm getting my telescope ready for a little bit of sketching. It's pretty early, sun has just recently set, so I've got plenty of time and plenty of energy to get my sights on NGC 1893 as well as its companion IC410, which is basically it's the faint nebulosity that surrounds the open cluster of 1893, and throw down a sketch. I would think it was about a week ago or so. I was just enjoying looking around in Auriga and exploring, checking out the Messiers that are there, 36, I think 37 and 38, as well as just exploring some of the asterisms. It's such a pretty spot, and right now it's perfectly situated in my skies to check it out. And as I was scanning around, went over to the Flaming Star Nebula. It didn't really excite me a whole lot, and then I switched over, and then I ended up checking out this one, IC410, and it kind of blew me away at how well I could see it. I was using a Nebustar filter, the TeleVue one, and it was pretty nice, especially surprising under the Bortle 7 skies. So I wrote it down in my notebook to just keep track of it and sketch it when I had a chance, and that's what I'm doing now. Unlike usual for tonight, I figured I would start out with just using my white Conte pencil to mark out the stars. I usually do it with just like a regular lead pencil first, and then switch over to the white to mark it down with the ink. But I figured I don't know. Sometimes it's a little hard to see that pencil mark on there, especially with the red light. So I figured I'd just start out with it, and then switched over to the fountain pen like usual to get a little bit more specific, particularly just kind of brightening up some of the brighter stars and then putting in a lot more of the dimmer ones. As I was doing that, I realized, well, I probably shouldn't be doing all of that with the Nebustar filter in because I can't see all the stars, so I switched it out, just took it out for a while, put in the rest of them, and then put the Nebustar filter back in. So that little black pause there that you saw a moment ago was just a little bit of time observing. Because this is nebula, and because it is not the best skies in my area, I definitely need to spend a little bit of time in pitch black just to get my eyes as acclimated as I can. I was spending that time mainly just trying to keep an eye at where the nebula looked like it was in relationships to some of the main stars. In the center of this nebula, in the open cluster, there are like two pairs of stars that I was using as sort of the primary thing. So you can see those first sketches here with my smudge tool were in that area, and then I'm kind of spreading out from there. Another thing is just to mention, I've mentioned it in past videos, but the smudge tool, generally the way I get in the first strokes of the nebulous stuff is by putting a lot of the shaved Conte onto my smudge tool itself. So it's kind of loaded up there. And then with very, very light pressure, I'll start throwing it down onto the paper. This isn't supposed to be a perfect representation of what I'm saying. It's more like placement and general kind of intensity of that. And then once I get that all down, when I get to this part here, this is super lightly with the edge of my smudge tool and on the opposite side, so there's no like residual Conte on there. I'm just rubbing everything down, softening it out, getting it into more of like kind of the brightness that I'm seeing in the eyepiece, as well as defining kind of the outer shape a little bit more specifically to what I was seeing in the eyepiece too. And this kind of super faint stuff isn't the easiest to sketch directly like this. I was just watching a video where Mel Bartels was talking about his sketching technique and how he pretty much just, it sounds like he writes down descriptions of what he's seeing initially, and then uses those to sketch it in the daytime afterwards, and then brings that sketch back out the second night to refer back to for refining and getting all the last little adjustments in there, which is a really interesting idea. Personally, there's something about like just being out under the stars and sketching while you're right there at the eyepiece. That's kind of what gives me a lot of pleasure. I guess in some ways I think about it kind of like the old French plein air painters, the landscape painters of the old day, where you're just there observing, you're getting it down what you can get down, kind of thing. Although I also know that like the plein airs too would kind of revisit and adjust as they're going along. And it definitely is something that I've thought about doing, and I probably will at some point. But as it is right now, I really just enjoy getting out there and sketching as much as I can directly at the eyepiece. So this part here is another bit of adjusted technique that I've been playing around with, which is like stippling, and just kind of like, again, loading up the smudge tool with the Conte, but then instead of drawing it on, it's putting like dots on there. And I find that that's a little bit more helpful to kind of like get the exact precise shaping that I'm looking for, as well as a little bit of texture in there. As I was putting that down, though, I was feeling like when I was looking back at the eyepiece, I was getting a little bit too heavy in some areas. So I threw down on the eraser here just to kind of like mark out some of the darker areas and pull that out just a little bit more. And then taking a couple more layers here to just get in some more of the specific details of where the brighter bits of the nebulosity I was seeing was hitting. Again, all of this is pretty much just going back and forth between one side of my smudge tool that has the Conte on it, and then the other side of the tool, which is clean. And then, as you're smudging things out, the Conte kind of like rubs up onto the cleanness. So then I'll just clean it off with my shirt or the side of my hand or something like that. And then at this point, I was feeling pretty good with the general placement and everything. Now, ultra lightly, super, super lightly with the clean side of the smudge tool, just getting as much of the residual Conte off the page, as well as evening it out a little bit more and kind of bringing down the brightness a little bit so that it feels a little bit more like what I'm seeing in the eyepiece. You can see too, I've switched over here to like an amber light. My gooseneck headlamps here have red and amber adjustments. I was doing that just so I could see. It's a little bit hard to, see under the red light the specifics. I've switched over here now, getting closer to the final bits of the sketches, to a black charcoal. And I find that this is pretty helpful just to get really fine details in for the dark lanes, or to pull out a little bit of the brighter stuff that I was finding, and defining a little bit of those kind of cloudier bits within there. So using the darker charcoal at the end is helpful. I do find that it's definitely stands out in the final drawing when you're looking at it in the daytime as something that's totally different than everything else. So I think usually at this point I'm a little bit tired and I don't really care, but I do want to kind of go back and try and figure out how to blend this in a little bit better. You'll see it in the final sketch too, what I'm talking about. At the very end here, you can see I'm smudging some bits on the bottom just because I was definitely noticing a little bit of extra nebulosity down there that I wasn't pulling in. The total sketch time for this one came in at just under an hour, 54 minutes to be exact. The seeing conditions, Bortle 7 skies, I would say that seeing was about 3. I mean, there was a wobble. When I pointed over to Jupiter, it was sort of like there's a pretty constant wobble with maybe like super clear visibility once every a second for every minute or so. So not super great. Transparency about 3.1. Naked eye, I could see, I think it's called Hades 2 next to Capella in Auriga. That was about the dimmest that I could see through there. And I was using my 10-inch f4.7 backpack Dob with a 13mm Nagler and the TeleVue Nebustar filter. The sketch was done on Nova black sketchbook paper, 8x10 inches, with the usual fountain pen, powdered Conte, smudge tool, white Conte pencil, and black charcoal pencil.